My talk today will deal with the public perception and visual representation of the Manchus in late Choson Korea. The British Museum has, can you see it's okay? Okay. Has a spectacular 8-panel screen entitled The Barbarians Hunting that presents a large group of Manchu hunters engaged in chasing and shooting arrows and metal guns and wildly running animals. The screen begins with the scene of a mounted Manchu hunter under rocks and pine trees opening fire at a flying bird. You can see over here. Yeah. The banners and spears partially featured on the large boulders in the foreground show that there are more hunters waiting for the signal to ambush their prey. The following scene presents a large hunting party making its way through the mountains. The Manchus on horseback are holding spears, swords, muskets, iron maces, bows and arrows, and banners accompanied by a falcon and 2 hound dogs. The presence of 2 Manchu hunters, one blowing a horn and the other beating a drum, indicates that the hunt has already begun. The rest of the screen portrays armed galloping horsemen charging deer, a boar, and a fox, and other game. The mounted archer turning his body back to shoot at the pursuing deer demonstrates superb equestrian skills. When I visited the British Museum and looked at the screen in 2001, a recent acquisition at the time, I wondered what the screen was all about and what historical and artistic circumstances motivated such screens to be produced during the late 18th and early 19th centuries. I have since then seen several of the 50-some extant Barbarians hunting screens in Korea and elsewhere. The figures on the screen have long been misidentified as Mongols. But it is clear that the hunters wore Manchu costume and that the landscape setting is not the desolate deserts and sandy hills of Mongolia, but the rugged mountains and plains of Manchuria. It is still a mystery why Barbarians hunting screens began to be painted and gained sudden popularity during the late 18th century. The Manchus had never been a subject of painting before the late 17th and 18th centuries. There is a small number of hand scroll. This is a screen format. You can see tiger hunting, and this is a hand scroll. Now in the Samsung Museum of Art, and album leaves that depict the Manchu troops and mounted hunters. In this regard, the monumental scale of Barbarians hunting screens is an astonishingly new phenomenon in Korean painting. The popularity of Barbarians hunting screens is, in fact, inseparable from the rise of ethnographic interest in the Manchus as horse riding and deer and tiger hunting tribesmen, who had been called Yain, wild men. Today's talk explores the historical significance of Barbarians hunting screens within the context of tumultuous Manchu-Korean relations after 1637, when the Korean king Injo surrendered to Hong Taiji, the first emperor of the Qing dynasty, kneeling in the snow and performing the ceremonial act of bowing and kowtowing to demonstrate his complete submission to the Manchu Great Khan. The Manchus, so today we are looking at this area. The Manchus were Tungusic tribes of what is called Manchuria, the northeastern region of present-day China. They were descendants of the Jurchen people who had ruled North China during the Qing dynasty in the 12th and 13th centuries. The powerful chieftain, the Manchus, like the horse riding and tiger hunting people. The powerful chieftain of the Jianzhou Jurchens, Nuruachi, this is Jianzhou Jurchens, this area. Or, as you can see, approximately this area is a Jurchen, Jianzhou Jurchens. Nuruachi or Nurugachi rose to prominence in the late 16th century. He organized and united various tribes in Manchuria by a combination of diplomacy, arranged marriages, and political alliances. In 1616, the Manchu established a powerful state called Jin, or later Jin, that posed a threat to the Ming dynasty. So in Korean records, he is called the Barbarian chieftain, so like Nochu, or in Chinese like Luqiu or Nuqiu. This is Nuruachi attack, Nikanwailan, the first very important battle in 1583 to 84. Then Manchus began attacking Chinese garrisons in the northeast. This was the beginning of what Frederick Wakeman called the Great Enterprise, eventually leading to the collapse of Ming rule in 1644. Fearful of the threat from Manchuria, the Ming Emperor Wanli mobilized 100,000 troops to defend his dynasty and invaded Manchuria along 4 separate roads. He called on the Korean king Gwang Hae-gun for assistance. Although Gwang Hae-gun had to act in loyalty to the fading Ming dynasty, he was a realist who instructed his officers to take a neutral stance when it became clear that Manchus were winning. Unable to refuse the Ming emperor's request, he dispatched about 10,000 soldiers under the command of General Kang Hong-lip to aid the Ming army in 1618. The Joseon monarch displayed uncommon talent for negotiating foreign affairs, avoiding being drawn into the developing conflict. He secretly enjoined General Kang to observe the situation carefully before committing himself or his troops to any particular course of action. As the tide of battle turned in favor of the Manchu army, the General Kang quickly surrendered to Nuruachi. The Battle of Saruhu. Saruhu is somewhere between Mukden and Poala. The Battle of Saruhu ended in an overwhelming victory for the Manchus. Gwang Hae-gun negotiated independently for peace with the Manchus and managed to avoid another war. For this, he was forced to abdicate in 1623 by the extreme pro-Ming and ultra-conservative Western faction, which launched a coup and crowned Prince Nungyang as the new king Injo. Injo and the Western faction took pro-Ming and anti-Manchu policies, which provoked 2 Manchu invasions of 1627 and 1636. They continued to take a hard-line policy toward the Manchus, keeping their strong alliance with the Ming. The Manchus, who remained mostly friendly to Choson Korea, began to regard Joseon as an enemy. This is Hong Taiji, and then you can see a portrait of Hong Taiji in the Arthur Sackler Gallery in Washington, D.C. In early December 1636, 120,000 Manchu troops crossed the frozen Yalu River under the personal command of Hong Taiji, Nuruachi's 8th son and successor. In the years 1635 and 1636, Hong Taiji publicly transformed the Joseon Khanate into an empire. He changed the name of his people from Joseon to Manchu. In 1636, he declared himself as an emperor, not a Joseon Khan, and named his empire Qing. So they came all the way down to Hansong, present-day Seoul. Manchu forces' swift advance was remarkable. They bypassed fortified strongholds and went straight to the capital city of Hansong, but King Injo could escape to Ganghwa Island. Ganghwa Island is here. The Manchu army drove him to the fortress of Namansan, a mountain stronghold about 30 miles south of Hansong, and cut off all of his supply lines. Manchu army besieged the fortress, and the Korean army suffered from the shortage of food and ammunition. After holding out against the Manchu army for several weeks, King Injo at last surrendered to Hong Taiji. Injo and his retainers rode down from the fortress, and here is Namansan fortress, and crossed the cold, bleak winter fields toward Samjeon-do, a major crossing point of the Han River, where the Manchu troops set up a 9-tiered altar for the ceremony of submission. At the top of the altar, Hong Taiji accepted King Injo's surrender. Injo bowed his head to the ground 9 times at the foot of the altar, acknowledging his submission to the Qing emperor. For the next 2.5 centuries, Korea served as a tributary of the Qing dynasty. After returning to Mukden is present-day Shenyang, Hong Taiji ordered Injo to put up a monument in honor of the excellent virtues of the Qing emperor. At the end of 1638, a stele called Daqing Huangdi Gongdebei, translated as stele to the merits and virtues of the emperor of the Great Qing, almost 4 meters tall, celebrating the glorious Manchu victory in Korea, inscribed in Manchu and Mongolian on the front side, and you can see here, Daqing Huangdi Gongdebei. In Chinese on the back, was erected at Samjeondo, where the ceremony of surrender had been conducted. Because of the strong political and emotional charge attached to it, this stele has been buried and then re-erected several times since 1638. In February 9, 2007, an enraged Korean who felt the stele was a symbol of national humiliation sprayed red paint on both sides of the monument. He wrote 370, referring to the 370th anniversary of King Injo's surrender. And here is Korean characters is 철거, literally meaning this stele must be demolished. This incident shows the traumatic memory of the king's submission and the strong anti-Manchu hostility still exists today. For some Koreans, the stele is a constant historical reminder of the tragedy of national trauma in 1637 when the civilized Korean king prostrated before the barbarian Manchu Khan. Injo's submission has become the unforgettable moment of national humiliation. The national trauma of the second Manchu invasion still hangs over Korean society. One of the recent best-selling novels, Namansan-song, down here, the Namansan Fortress by contemporary Korean writer Kim Hun, has appealed greatly to Korean readers with its historical narrative about King Injo and the defending Koreans under siege in the bitter cold winter of 1636 to 37. The impact of the second invasion of the Manchus on late Choson Korea was enormous. Korea's feelings of cultural superiority gave rise to an intense hostility toward the Qing. The prominent officials who had been seized and executed became brave martyrs and national heroes. Some politically brilliant officials, such as Choi Myung-gil, who already noticed the power of the Manchu army and advocated peace, came to be considered traitors. Issues of loyalty to the Ming and enmity toward the Qing were at the heart of the politics of the Joseon court. Even after the Ming fell, some Korean scholars and officials continued to use the reign title of the Ming Emperor Wanli, who had sent troops to assist the Joseon court to fight against the Japanese invaders in the 1590s, and that of Chongjeon, the last Ming ruler who took his life by hanging himself on Coal Hill just to the north of the Forbidden City, where the rebel Li Chang was approaching to take the capital city of Beijing in 1644. An illuminating example of the continuous use of the reign dates of the Ming emperors, Wanli and Chongjeon, is Chinese commoners. An early 19th century painting showing 2 women and a boy followed by a dog on their way back home from the market, attributed to Kim Duk-shin, now in the Sunmun University Museum. The 5 Chinese characters here, they call this Sungjong Yu Minpyeong, in Chinese Chongjeon Yi Minping. They commented by a leftover subject of the Chongjeon name. The inscription writer calls himself a Korean royal subject of the last Ming emperor, who died almost 200 years earlier. Nationwide resentment of the Manchus led to the celebration of past military victories of the Jurchens, military campaigns against the Jolchons at Shichen village, datable to 1849, now in the Samsung Museum of Art, one of the three extant later copies of a now lost late 17th century original, presents the heroic saga of General Il with 2,500 soldiers who crossed the Tumon River and attacked the Jolchons at Shichen village in 1588. He burned 200 houses and killed 380 tribesmen. The pillaging activities of Jolchon marauders had been a major threat to many border towns along the Tumon River. We have the other later copies now, one in the Korean Military Academy Museum and in a private collection. And Shichen village is somewhere here. The Jolchon chieftain Lee Tangji's invasion of northeastern towns in 1583 was a serious challenge to the Choson court's hegemony over the Tumon River boundary. Lee Tangji, with 10,000 soldiers, marched on to attack Gyeongwon. Gyeongwon is here. Soon, Gyeongwon and other garrison forts fell one after another. After a hard struggle, General Silip subdued the uprising. Il's massive attack to destroy the Jolchon village was one of the vigorous military campaigns against the Jolchons that the Choson court launched after Lee Tangji's invasion. In the late 17th century, Igyeon, the grandson of Il, commissioned a painter to create a commemorative painting portraying his grandfather's triumphant battle at Shichen village. During the early 18th century, some important members of the prominent Anti-Manchu old doctrine faction, a result from a splintering of the Western faction, made enormous efforts to enhance the status of Il as a national hero. You can see this Korean army and all these Jolchons. 이담, 이의현, and 이재, who had contributed short biographies and eulogies to collected works of Il, were extreme anti-Manchu members of the old doctrine faction. Despite their praises, Il's victory was in fact a small military achievement. While Il's army consisted of 2,500 highly trained soldiers, dispatched by the Choson court, the slaughtered 380 Jolchons were mostly either less skilled warriors or unarmed civilians. Nonetheless, Il's military campaigns came to be celebrated as a glorious victory over the Jolchons at a time when the old doctrine faction pushed an anti-Manchu policy forward. The moment of national humiliation at Samjeon-do in 1637 led to the creation of military campaigns against the Jolchons at Shichen village, in which two helpless Jolchon captives are shown kneeling on the ground and begging for their lives before Il. Il is here. The scene is exactly the opposite of King Injo kneeling before Hong Taiji. At the center of the anti-Manchu policy was Song Shi-yeol, the paramount leader of the old doctrine faction, who was ultra-conservative, conspiring with King Hyojong to overthrow the Qing and restore the Ming. His dedicated loyalty to the noble cause of Ming restoration played a central role in further fostering anti-Manchu sentiments. Song wrote biographies of three royal scholar officials that was intended to illuminate the heroic and patriotic deeds of the three scholar officials, Hong Ik-han, Yun-jip, and Oh-dal-jae, who had forcefully argued against making peace with the Manchus in 1637 and were later seized and executed in Mukden. They became timeless anti-Manchu martyrs and heroes for the old doctrine faction. Portrait of Yun-jip, a 19th century copy of now lost 17th century original, now in the National Museum of Korea, has a long inscription illuminating the loyalty, righteousness, moral virtue, and martyrdom of the anti-Manchu scholar official. The inscription includes a character Lo referring to Manchus as barbarians. In 1704, King Sukjong constructed the Daebodan, altar of a great retribution or gratitude, in the northwestern area of the Changdeok Palace, a magnificent two. This is the Western Palace, and then you can see this is a Daebodan. So you can see over here. A magnificent two-story altar in memory of the Emperor Wanli, for whom royal rituals and sacrificial rites were performed. In 1749, King Yongjo expanded the altar and began to perform rituals of gratitude for the first and last Ming emperors along with Wanli. Yongjo made numerous efforts to establish the role of the Korean royal house as a symbolic heir to the Ming. His aggressive campaign to emphasize the Korean role as a sole carrier of Chinese Confucian civilization is clearly demonstrated in his anti-Manchu statement. The Central Plains exude the stenches of barbarians, and our green hills are alone. The Central Plains means China, and the green hills thus Korea. This is another version, and you can see it here, Daebodan. The Manchu invasions and subsequent overthrow of the Ming in 1644 convinced most in Choson Korea of the necessity of dealing with the powerful barbarians, but disdain for Manchu rule remained extremely strong. The nostalgic memory of the Ming and absolute rejection of Manchu hegemony led eventually to Koreans' claim that Joseon was the only legitimate successor to Chinese civilization. It is interesting to note that even today, some descendants of Joseon scholar official families, in one way or another, related to Song Shiyeol and old doctrine faction, perform an annual sacrificial ceremony for the three Ming emperors, Hongwu, Ju and Chang, Wanli, and Chongjeon, at a shrine called the Daebodan, the same name as the altar in the Changdeok Palace, in northern Gapyeong County of Gyeonggi Province, far out in the countryside. David Mason's brilliant anthropological study of this ceremony has highlighted that the Joseon court's ideology of the veneration of the Ming and the rejection of the Qing is still alive in local Confucian communities. The probing policy pursued by Song Shiyeol, Sukjong, and Yongjo had an enormous impact on the worldview and perception of Confucian scholar officials active in the first half of the 18th century. They continued to recognize the Qing rulers as barbarian usurpers. Under the rule of vigorous monarchs such as Kangxi, Yongzheng, and Qianlong, the Qing dynasty expanded its borders and developed into an Indo-Asian empire. They ushered in the splendid age of political stability, economic prosperity, and cultural brilliance. The nationwide resentment of the Manchus prevented Korean scholars and officials from accepting the reality of Manchu rule in China. Following in the footsteps of Song Shiyeol, Hwang Kyung-won, a prominent scholar official and one of the old doctrine faction, wrote biographies of secondary officials of the Ming, a collection of biographies of Korean scholars, officials, generals, and martyrs who suffered and sacrificed their lives for Ming royalism, fiercely resisting against the Manchus. The utmost honor is given to the patriotic death of the three royal scholars who were taken to the Manchu court and brutally executed in Mukden as a result of their unchanging loyalty to the Ming. This is sort of funny anyway. Just Korean scholars, they consider themselves, just the royal subjects of the bygone Ming dynasty. The case of the eminent literary painter Lee In-sang, a close friend of Hwang Kyung-won, shows how deeply and powerfully Ming royalism exerted influence over the intellectual community of the early 18th century. Lee In-sang was a descendant of Lee Kyung-yeol, who was ultra pro-Ming high official prominent at the Injo court, and as a result was later included in Hwang Kyung-won's biographies of secondary officials of the Ming. Despite his prestigious family background, he was born as a secondary son. The secondary son, called Seoul, was an illegitimate son whose common mother was not an official wife to the Yangban father. Yangban means a ruling class. Although they belonged to the ruling Yangban class, they were deprived of all the social prestige and privileges attached to the class. His paintings are primarily concerned with his complex mindscape of agony, anguish, despair, and bitterness. In dying, chrysanthemums, thought to be his last painting. Now in the National Museum of Korea, the painter made a suggestive use of the floral symbolism attached to chrysanthemums to reveal his self-identity and social status as a man of endless sorrow in self-imposed exile. The chrysanthemum had long been associated with the life of the late 4th and early 5th century Chinese recluse poet Tao Chen, better known to us as Tao Yuanming. The drooping branches, dried leaves, and withered flowers indicate that the end of the socially marginalized painter's life as a recluse is near. He was an interesting character. Although he was Seoul, he was one of the most fervent Ming loyalists of his time. Throughout his life, he showed his unchanging loyalty to the fallen Chinese dynasty. It would be thus be no coincidence that he aligned himself with such Ming loyalist painters as Hong Nan, a Buddhist monk in Anhui province, and Shi Tao, a descendant of the Ming imperial family, and he made self-conscious references to the styles and themes of these Chinese painters. Hong Nan's style, characterized by the quiet and steady compositions, a cold and detached atmosphere, angular and austere landscape forms, and dry brushwork, became a primary source of inspiration for Yi In-sang's art. His 9 Dragon Falls, dated 1752, now in the National Museum of Korea, is similar in style to Hong Nan's The Coming of Autumn in the Honolulu Academy of Arts, in terms of the use of dry, angular brushwork and reductive and abstract composition. Upstream Torrent and Yongyu, now in the Choson Art Museum of Pyongyang, North Korea, with its pervasive atmosphere of emptiness and bleakness, bears in style and composition a strong resemblance to Hong Nan's landscape in the Paris Museum, Beijing. He also actively emulated in his landscapes the thematic density and allegorical allusiveness that are characteristic of works of Shi Tao. We do not have clear evidence of how In-sang gained access to the works of Hong Nan and Shi Tao. It is clear, however, that the influence of these Ming royalist painters is present in his paintings. Present talk on the tall trees, dated 1739 in a private collection in Seoul, shows his stylistic indebtedness to Shi Tao's brushwork, the sweeping, fluctuating, organic lines in the drawing of overhanging rocks and cliffs in In-sang's present talk on the tall trees are similar to those in Shi Tao's a man in a mountain pavilion, now in the C.C. Wang family collection in New York. In-sang shared the power of self-expressive calligraphic brushwork with Shi Tao. Most of his paintings are imbued with a sense of austere simplicity, thematic density, and enigmatic self-referentiality. Trees and Rocks, dated 1738, now in the National Museum of Korea, a stylistically reductive landscape of a group of trees and rocks, shows a mood of desolation and melancholy. Shi Tao's Trees as My Former Life, now in the Tianjin City Art Museum, suggests the kind of pictorial thought that he used in the creation of trees and rocks. Shi Tao's inscription in the upper right reads, "This is my former life." Shi Tao used the trees as a symbol for his troubled life as a descendant of the Ming imperial family and as a professional painter selling paintings for his living after the fall of the Ming dynasty. In the same vein, the sense of wintry bleakness and desolation revealed in Yi In-sang's Trees and Rocks can be closely related to the painter's life of suffering as a frustrated Seoul intellectual. Yi's inscription conveys a bitter sense of self-doubt and despair. According to his inscription, he used ugly rocks as a mirror of his self-image as a miserable man at the margins of society. Both in style and theme, the paintings of Yi and Shutao are similar. His pursuit of the styles of Ming royalist painters seems to have been inseparable from his strong anti-Manchu feelings. In many of his writings, he regarded the Manchus as barbarians or even subhuman beasts. In 1741, he attended the court ritual held at the Debodan for the Ming emperors and swore to himself that he would follow in the footsteps of Song Shi'er and commit himself to avenging the fall of the Ming. He mentioned that the Ming was the country of his parents, and the Qing was that of his parents' arch enemy. For him, the filial son's duty was to vengeance on the Manchus for his parents' death. His association of the Ming with the Choson's parents was eagerly shared and supported by many fellow anti-Manchu scholar officials. When Hwang Kyung-won was dispatched as a member of the Korean embassy to the Qing court, Yi In-sang relentlessly criticized his diplomatic mission. He told Hwang that going to the Manchu court only meant to meet with filthy barbarians. Many contemporaries of Yi joined him in making critical remarks on Korean envoys' activities in Beijing. They marked the tribute missions to the Qing court as pathetic acts of betrayal. As time went on, anti-Manchu feelings began to soften as more open-minded scholar officials, merchants, and non-elite people came to accept the reality of Manchu rule in China. Korean envoys to China, who had experienced directly the superior material culture of the Qianlong reign, played a significant role in leading Koreans to regard long-held anti-Manchu prejudices as only ideological illusions. Memoirs of Beijing and other regions by some of Korean envoys, such as Park Ji-won's 열하일기 The Lehe Diary, which painstakingly recorded what he had seen and experienced along the travel routes from the northern border region of Korea through Beijing to the imperial summer residence in Lehe, present-day Cheongda, had a remarkable influence on the increasing acceptance of the reality of the Qing rule of China. As a result, a growing number of Koreans began to change their feelings and attitudes towards the Manchus. For them, Manchus were at least no longer barbarians. Some Koreans who had traveled to China already noticed that anti-Manchu sentiments pervasive in society were largely manipulated and ungrounded, even at a time when pro-Ming officials were dominant at court. The literary luminary Hong Se-tae was one such open-minded man from the non-elite class. Hong was born into a poor Jungin family. Jungin means middle people, referring to government-employed technical specialists such as interpreters, physicians, mathematicians, astronomers, accountants, painters, and musicians. He rose to eminence as a leading poet and passed the foreign language examinations. He became an interpreter of the Chinese language and accompanied Korean envoys to China and Japan. Although he was personally associated with ultra-pro-Ming officials, his experience of Qing China led him to write an interesting short novel, The Tale of Kim Young-chul, illuminating the non-elite class attitudes toward the Manchus. The Tale of Kim Young-chul details the painful life of the commoner Kim Young-chul, who participates as a foot soldier in the Battle of Saruhu in the winter of 18 to 19, a battle between the Ming army and Nuruachi's troops. As mentioned earlier, the Korean King Gwanghaegun sent General Kang Hongnip with 10,000 soldiers to assist the Ming. Although Kim Young-chul survives the battle, he becomes a Manchu captive and later a slave in the household of the Manchu noble Aruna in Mukden. He marries a Manchu woman and has 2 sons. Kim, however, escapes to Dongzhou in Henan province and marries a Chinese woman having 2 sons. But 6 years later, deserting his Chinese wife and sons, he escapes to Korea and remarries a Korean woman. After his return to Korea, Kim participates twice in battles between the defending Ming and Manchu Choson United Army as an interpreter and soldier. In 1641, he encounters the old Manchu master Aruna in battle. Aruna, who has been enraged at Kim's escape from Mukden to China, takes Kim to Hong Taiji for punishment. The Korean general Yurim gives Aruna a large amount of money to save Kim's life. Although he successfully returns to Korea, Kim is forced to work as a poor soldier until his death, in order to pay back his debt to Yurim. The writer Hong Se-tae deeply sympathized with Kim Young-chul. He describes in detail and with compassion and pity the tragic life of Kim. He ascribes the misery and sacrifice of Kim to the incompetence of the Joseon court that has sent innocent commoners such as Kim to battle. By contrast, Hong showed his reverence to the Manchu ruler Hong Taiji for treating Korean captives with care and affection. When Aruna takes Kim Young-chul to Hong Taiji, the Manchu emperor not only forgives the Korean soldier, but also gives him 10 rolls of silk, a horse, and a mule as reward for his service in 3 battles. Furthermore, Hong Taiji tells Kim that he always wants to treat Korean captives as his sons. Hong Taiji's warm personality and generosity deeply moves Kim to the extent that he comes to believe that the Manchu ruler would be able to conquer China and unite the entire world. For Kim, Hong Taiji was a benevolent, caregiving, and outstanding ruler. In this novel, Hong Se-tae made efforts to change the image of Hong Taiji as a ruthless barbarian ruler, an image that had long been projected by the Korean elite class since the national humiliation of 1637. He instead portrays Hong Taiji as a warm-hearted and generous Manchu ruler who was qualified to become the emperor of the world. As the tale of Kim Young-chul was widely circulated, the new image of Hong Taiji as a benevolent ruler played an important role in changing the Korean perception of the Manchus. The novel offered realistic descriptions of the lives and social customs of the Manchus. It is no coincidence that ethnographic interest in the Manchus began to arise in the early 18th century. The cultivation of ethnographic curiosity about the Manchus were furthered by the circulation of diaries by Shin Chung-il and Lee Min-hwan. As detailed in Pamela Crossley's The Manchus, Shin Chung-il's Memoirs of the Jianzhou Jurchens is a remarkable travel diary, with maps reporting valuable information on the physical appearances and personalities of Nuruachi and his younger brother and contender Surugachi, the characteristics of Jurchen society, the livelihoods of Jurchen people, and most notably the organization of the 8 banners. In 1595, Joseon court dispatched Shin to Nuruachi's capital in order to resolve the problems of border incidents and Korean captives. Shin made a long overland journey to Poala, where Nuruachi was based. He encountered many Jurchen settlements, most no larger than 20 households, supported by fishing, hunting for pelts, collecting pine nuts or ginseng, and growing various crops. He also often saw nomadic bands dressed in furs, moving their herds toward the pastures, and Jolchon men armed with bows, arrows, and swords. In his diary, Shin recorded in minute detail what he had seen and experienced in Poala, offering a superb ethnographic account of the Jianzhou Jolchons. Lee Min-hwan's record of what I saw and heard in Jianzhou Jolchon Society, Gonju Gyeonmunok and Jianzhou Jianwonru, datable to 1620, is another anthropological account of the Manchus, detailing the natural environment of southern Manchuria, the physiognomic traits, clothes, foods, languages, social customs, livelihoods, marriage practices, and death rituals of the Jianzhou Jolchons, and the military organization of a tribesman called the Bannerman system. Lee Min-hwan accompanied General Kang Hong-lip as an assistant and was later seized as a captive by the Jolchons in the Battle of Saruhu in 1619. While staying in Hotuala, he meticulously recorded what he had seen and encountered. He was particularly impressed by Nuwachi's leadership, constantly encouraging his subjects and the military strength of well-trained Jolchon soldiers. For him, Nuwachi was a strong and brilliant leader. The wide circulation of anthropological writings about the Manchus, including Shin's and Yi's diaries, played a central role in cultivating ethnographic interest among late Choson Koreans in the Manchu way of life and in mitigating anti-Manchu sentiments. So the first Nuruach, the base is Poala, and then he moved to Hotuala, and then he finally settled in Mukdan. So Shin Chung-il went to the Poala, and Lee Min-hwan went to the Hotuala. The Koreans' changing attitudes towards the Manchus was also inseparable from the growing openness of late Joseon society and culture. Late 18th Choson Korea saw the rapid expansion of knowledge and information about the outside world. Through the activities of Korean envoys to Beijing and Edo, present-day Tokyo, hitherto unknown knowledge and information were brought into public circulation. The strong desire to know new things laid the foundation for the culture of curiosity. The wide circulation of travel writings by envoys about Qing China and Edo Japan played a significant role in the formation of the new culture in which scholars, artists, and merchants nurtured their curiosity about foreign lands and people, rare plants and flowers, strange animals, luxury goods and collectibles, Western prints and paintings, and scientific devices. The Shanghai Pass, currently in the LG Yeonam Library, Myeongju University, and Great Harmony Hall in the Forbidden City, now in the Korean Christian Museum of Art, Sungsil University, are pictorial records of what Korean envoys saw in China. The Shanghai Pass shows a strong fortress with a spectacular landscape. Great Harmony Hall presents an enormous building with a grand view of the Forbidden City bathed in mist. See here. Both the Shanghai Pass and the Great Harmony Hall were two of the most famous landmarks the 18th century Koreans wanted to visit. Chinese commoners attributed to Kim Duk-shin, discussed earlier, is a rare painting depicting ordinary Qing Chinese or Manchu people, reflecting the period's interest in foreigners. Widespread interest in foreign lands and people is also found in illustration of geographical surveys, an album of a map and figure paintings now in the National Museum of Korea. This album consists of a map of Japan and illustrations of a Manchu state councilor, a Mongol warrior, a Mongol Buddhist monk, a Manchu bannerman carrying an elephant, a man from Ryukyu Islands, you can see this, and a farmer, a Westerner, an old man called Dalja. I don't know, but most probably referring to Tatar, like a Chinese sound like a Daz is like a Dada is Tatar. With the exception of the Mongols and the Ryukyu man and the farmer, the figures shown in the album are all in Manchu dress. Imun's Two Mongols on Camelback is closely related to the ethnographic interest of the time in foreign people. Marvels and wonders about camels are frequently found in Korean embossed travel writings. It is interesting to note that Korean painters began to paint foreign animals. You can see here, this is Mongol, the yellow dress, and then this type of head, and then the camel, Purple 1797, and then the city of a grand piece of screen. You can see here, these are camels. As seen in two Mongols on camelback, in Black Dog, Kim Do-ryang depicts a western dog scratching its body under a tree. Along with camels, western dogs became objects of wonder and fascination for painters. Probably like I don't know, probably this dog is similar to this one. See, fighting dog. The rise of ethnographic interest in foreigners is also evident in Manchu bannerman and Mongol woman on horseback by Kim Woo-shin, Tokyo National Museum. The painting presents a Manchu soldier in conversation with a Mongol warrior woman on the riverbank. The Manchu soldier, wearing a hat with peacock feathers and holding a lance, points to a group of flying geese over the distant mountains. The Mongol woman on horseback, wearing a tall gugu headdress with a long feather, carries a bow and arrows. It is called gugu, G-U-G-U. It's like gugu headdress. The gugu headdress was one of the signature items of dress for elite Mongol women. The hand gesture of the Manchu bannerman suggests that he is strongly urging her to shoot arrows at the flying geese. In his inscription, this is the inscription here, Kang Se-hwang mentions that this painting is excellent to the degree it can be equal in quality to Grand Hunt by Chun Ji-jong, a southern song painter famous for northern equestrian scenes and landscapes. Chun was one of the leading painters at the court of the Emperor Ningjong. He specialized in painting khitan, horsemen, and landscapes of the northern steppes in the tradition of Hukgui and Hwangjonggdao. Hunting excursion attributed to Chun Ji-jong, now in the National Paris Museum, Taipei, highlights the dynamic speed and motion of mounted nomads chasing after deer. Nomads hunting with falcons in the Metropolitan Museum of Art and nomad horsemen hunting in the Cleveland Museum of Art, both attributed to Chun Ji-jong, depict the Liao Khitan Emperor and his party engaged in seasonal hunting expeditions. They watch from a lower hill as a hunting falcon attacks a white swan, and mounted hunter in the distance uses a bola to bring down a deer. Some of the paintings by or attributed to Chun or later copies came to Korea by the mid-18th century. Chun's paintings mentioned in some late Joseon textual records offered a source of inspiration for Korean painters to depict scenes of Manchu life. Ethnographic interest in the Manchus is clearly evident in two Manchus attributed to Kim Yun-gyum, now in the National Museum of Korea, portraying two Manchu soldiers in conversation on the road. The Manchu with a horse on the right wears a hat with a single-eyed peacock feather, a token of reward for military valor in Manchu society. Something like this, peacock feather. The carefully drawn facial expression of the Manchu on the right shows the painter's remarkable attention to detail. Mounted Manchu hunters by Kang Il-hun, Kim Yun-gyum's contemporary, now in a private collection, is another example highlighting the ethnographic interest of the period in Manchu life. The painter portrays two Manchu hunters on horseback with a falcon and a dog making their way to the hunting ground. This is a hunting dog, this is falcon. A recently discovered painting, Manchu bannerman on a camel attributed to Kim Hong-do, also shows a Manchu soldier on camelback standing in bold relief against the desert plain. Tiger Hunt by Lee In-moon, a close friend and fellow court painter of Kim Hong-do, now in the National Museum of Korea, presents three Manchu hunters pursuing a tiger in the barren mountains. The two hunters on horses charge a fleeing tiger, wielding and thrusting their lances. The gesture of the mounted archer turning his body back to shoot at the tiger recalls the tradition of a Parthian shot. In this painting, the superior horsemanship and mounted archery of the Manchus are dramatically demonstrated. The fascination with Manchu life continued to inspire Korean painters. Furthermore, Chinese paintings of Manchu life that had been transmitted to Korea seem to have laid the foundation for the popularity of Korean paintings of Manchu hunters. During the Qianlong reign, many court paintings of Manchu life were produced. Qianlong considered riding, shooting, and the Manchu language to be the most important of the old Manchu customs. Qianlong's awareness of his ethnic origins as a deer and tiger hunting tribesman led him to pursue his equestrian roots throughout his life. Shooting to deer with one arrow dated 1781, now in the Paris Museum, Beijing, shows the Emperor Qianlong at the age of 71 actively engaged in hunting deer. Qianlong's efforts to restore Manchu old customs led to the institutionalization of imperial hunts, which became one of the central themes for Qing court paintings. Calling for Deer by Giuseppe Castiglione, dated to 1741, now in the Paris Museum, Beijing, is a pictorial record of the emperor's first hunting expedition depicting a large mounted hunting party making its way through the mountains near Mulan, north of Chengde. The Mulan hunt became the emblem of the warrior origins of the horse riding and tiger hunting nation. For Qianlong, this is Qianlong Emperor, the outside actual battles, the hunt was the only way the bannermen were reminded of how Manchu life used to be. The spectacle of the autumn hunts at Mulan is vividly demonstrated in the Mulan hunt by such master painters as Giuseppe Castiglione, Jin Kun, and Ding Guanpeng. Now in the museum, the Emperor Qianlong's journey to Mulan and his act of hunting deer. In scroll 4, Qianlong is depicted on horseback, about to bring down, Qianlong is here, bring down a large stag with an arrow, while bannermen are engaged in batu hunt. The mastery of horsemanship and archery, characteristic of Manchu military virtue and pride, is highlighted by Qianlong's heroic act of shooting at a stag with his horse at full gallop. Illustration in the spirit of the Emperor Qianlong's poem, Engagement in the Batu Hunt by Giuseppe Castiglione and Pang Chong, now in the Paris Museum, Beijing, presents a spectacular scene of hunting deer and tigers in the large-scale chase at Mulan. The Batu hunt at Mulan was a magnificent martial display, originated as an old Manchu practice. In addition to Qing paintings, some copies of the Manzhou Yuanliu Kao, the researches on Manchu origins, published in 1783, the first coherent national history of the Manchus, detailing the geography of Manchuria and the ethnic genealogy and customs of the Manchus, were brought to Korea by the end of the 18th century. King Zhengzhou was aware of the publication of the Manzhou Yuanliu Kao in 1785 and showed his personal interest in the content of the book. Some early 19th century Korean scholars cited the Manzhou Yuanliu Kao in their writings. the comprehensive history book on the Manchus of barbarian origins served to intensify Koreans' ethnographic interest in the northern tribesmen. Korean envoys in Beijing could have seen such coat paintings of a Manchu life, given that scenes of a hunting tiger had never been painted before Yi Mun's time. Qing coat paintings of the Mulan hunt, such as a tiger hunt, now in the Paris Museum, Beijing, were in all likelihood sources for Yi's tiger hunt. In addition, paintings by lesser-known coat painters or minor painters active in Beijing or regional paintings of Manchu life could also have provided a source of inspiration for Korean painters. Works by Jiang Shizhou, Ding Yu, and Miani, the grandson of Qianlong, presenting Manchu horsemen taking aim at flying birds or pursuing their quarry with falcons and felines are examples that could have fostered interest in the hunting activities of the Manchus among Korean painters. This is Ding Yu, and this is Miani. Miani is the grandson of the Emperor Qianlong. So his full name is like the Aishinji or Miani. Same. And then this inscription respectively painted by your subject Miani. So he was one of the court painters as well. Ibangwon's Manchus hunting, now in the Ihwa Women's University Museum, shows a group of Manchu hunters, male and female, with falcons and hound dog marching through the autumn mountains and chasing a tiger. The presence of the two women hunters in the middle section of the scroll is very interesting, since Manchu horse women were never, or at least rarely, represented in Qing paintings. Barbarians hunting, a similar painting in hand scroll format, now in the Samsung Museum of Art, presents the dramatic scene of rapidly moving Manchu hunters in pursuit of a deer, a boar, or a tiger. Once again, equestrianism and archery, the emblems of a Manchu identity, are highly emphasized. The bravery, power, and speed of the horse riding and tiger hunting Manchus were a constant source of enchantment for Koreans who had been familiar with the comforts and luxuries of a sedentary and urban life. The eminent 18th century poet Shin Gwang-ha, famous for his travelogues of various places, wrote a poem on a painting called Hunting Barbarians by a certain Che, and then you can see here. When I went to a place near the Chang mountains, I often encountered the hunting barbarians. Two horsemen swiftly chased foxes and hares in a desolate lowland expanse with autumn grasses and barren trees. Shin was deeply impressed by the spectacle of two mounted Manchu hunters charging foxes and hares in the barren terrain. The popularity of Barbarians' hunting screens was inseparable from Koreans' fascination with Manchu life, highlighted in Shin's poem. To date, more than 50 Barbarians' hunting screens, mostly datable to the early 19th century, have survived. During this period, despite the anti-Manchu sentiments of prominent scholar officials, there exists great popular interest in the North. Korean painters showed respect for and curiosity about Manchu life. Some textual records mention that the most eminent court painter of the late 18th century, Kim Hong-do, was the inventor of the barbarians hunting genre. He is said to have painted a large 8-panel screen on silk called Grand Hunt in the barren and dark mountains, which is now lost. King Jeongjo wrote a poem on a screen painting of the same title that was displayed in his studio. Kim Hong-do's screen and Jeongjo's poem combined to indicate that scenes of Manchu life came to fascinate the court. Some scholars also wrote of the captivating viewing experience of barbarians hunting screens. It must also be noted that the popular celebration of barbarians hunting screens had an impact on the special painting examinations for court painters. In 1812 and 1815, scenes of the Manchu hunt became painting examination questions. Although titled Barbarians Hunting, no scornful remarks on the screens are found in any extant textual record of the time. The term barbarian no longer carried pejorative and contemptuous meaning. The popular admiration of Manchu life led to the large production of barbarians hunting screens. Major patrons and clients of the screens are thought to have been military officials and wealthy merchants. This suggests that the non-elite celebration of Manchu life played a key role in popularizing barbarians hunting screens that were used for decorating their homes. I'm sorry, let me see. The British Museum painting is perhaps the best of all extant barbarians hunting screen. The landscape, detailed figures reflect the painter's intimate knowledge of Manchu life, costume, equipage, and gesture. Carefully drawn and richly colored figures in various poses and gestures, and meticulously depicted tall pines, and suggest that the screen was painted for the court or a high-ranking government official. The spirit of Manchu hunters pursuing quarry is vividly conveyed in the vigor and swiftness of galloping horsemen. Folk painting versions of the subject also gained enormous popularity among the low-class people. Despite unskilled brushwork and knife treatment, they appealed greatly to the taste of commoners. This is now folk painting version. Let me show that this is painting. There are several. And now one barbarians hunting screen in the Cleveland Museum of Art. And then this is a folk painting version. There are many. Yeah, now one in the Brooklyn Museum. Barbarians hunting, a 12-panel screen in the Samsung Museum of Art, is the most remarkable of folk painting versions and shows a large group of Manchu horsemen hunting tigers, boars, deer, foxes, and game birds in mountain valleys. The tribal chieftain is shown seated with a party of female attendants armed with swords and arrows in a large yacht, the emblem of the Manchu encampment. Sorry. In front of the yacht, a group of guards stands firm in formation to protect the chieftain from unpredictable dangers. The rest of the screen is filled with galloping horsemen up and down the mountain valleys to charge fleeing animals with swords, spears, maces, and arrows. Trained falcon. This is a hound dog, and the falcon is here. Trained falcons and felines are either attacking game or ready to take action. The spectacular performance of the Manchu hunt demonstrated in this screen indicates the extensive knowledge the painter had of Manchu life. The Manchus depicted here are no longer brutal foreign invaders and arch enemies. They are entertainers who amuse Korean viewers with extraordinary performances of horsemanship and archery. Disdain for the Manchus is nowhere to be found. The hunt, the core of Manchu life, is now deep into the mentality of late Choson Koreans as a source of delight and enjoyment. Barbarians' hunting screens offer a window into the hitherto neglected area of study in Korean history, in which the constantly changing Korea-Manchu relationship makes an interesting case for late Joseon people's romantic fascination with and curiosity about the northern land and tribesmen. The screens lead us to the world of Manchu life, into which late Joseon Koreans made exciting imagined excursions. The social energy of the Korean admiration for Manchu hunters circulated everywhere in late Joseon society. Thank you.